السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Can you hear me? Alhamdulillah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وبعد. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is one of the live sessions where we talk about some of the upcoming courses. This usually happens when we receive a lot of questions, when some of the mashayikh who attend the durus in the madrasa, or the students who want to attend our durus, when they come to us asking questions about courses when things are not clear. So the upcoming course, I think maybe 26th or 25th, I'm not sure, of September, it is the Hanbali choices of Mustalah al-Hadith, or in Mustalah al-Hadith. And usually when you ask any questions on the Facebook page, I receive them. If they are about courses, and even questions, fiqhi questions, I usually receive them and I try to answer most of them. A couple of people asked this question: what does it mean, Hanbali choices in Mustalah Hadith? What does it mean to have like a Hanbali choice in Mustalah Hadith? Is the issue of the Madhhabs, does it interfere in Mustalah Hadith? We thought that Mustalah Hadith is an agreed upon ilm. So we might answer these questions, and this might be helpful for the people who want to join this. A lot of scholars said, especially in the Shafi'i books, a lot of scholars said that ilm Mustalah al-Hadith became Shafi'i in the 4th century. So since the 300s, wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, since the 300s of the 4th century of the Hijri calendar, ilm al-Hadith became Shafi'i. This means that most of the scholars who dedicated their studies to ulum al-Hadith, they served that purpose by also dedicating their results to the usul that agree with the Shafi'i madhhab. You do not see me a lot here in live sessions on YouTube. This doesn't happen a lot if compared with the lessons I give in general. So I want you to be restricted to two things. First of all, postpone your questions because you haven't heard much, and this doesn't raise any questions. It's just I'm still explaining what I need to say. Secondly, avoid stupid questions. So work hard on your questions, form them, write them down, and then come with your question, and it will be welcomed, and I will be happy to answer it. But this is ilm. This is not like we are not in a street or we haven't met on a cafe. This is ilm, okay? So please have some respect when you deal with the ilm. So these scholars said, okay, ilm al-hadith has become Shafi'i since the 4th century, and it is explained in a very simple way. Everyone who studied ilm al-hadith and whose works were recognized by scholars was Shafi'i. طبعا when I say everyone, we can have a couple of examples like Qadi Iyad al-Maliki or so. طبعا it wasn't in the 300s, it wasn't in the 4th century, it was after that, but it is a very important contribution to ulum al-hadith in his book Al-Ilma', and even other books and other contributions by scholars who are not Shafi'i. But most of the scholars are Shafi'i, especially when ilm al-hadith before Shaykh al-Imam al-Hafiz Abi Amr ibn Salah was different. It was a different practice, and it was a different way, and even the terminology didn't reach that maturity until Shaykh Abu Amr ibn Salah taught his muqaddimah or his book Ulum al-Hadith in separate durus, and then it became a book after he finished or after finishing these durus. Ibn Salah is a Shafi'i, and people who worked on his muqaddimah, they were all Shafi'iyya. Most of them were Shafi'iyya. People who worked on it, to serve it, to explain it, not just to criticize it, to explain it, they were mostly Shafi'i. Imam Zayn al-Din al-Iraqi, Shaykh al-Islam ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, الشيخ الأصولي العلامة بدر الدين الزركشي, الإمام محي الدين النووي, بدر الدين ibn Jama'a, Ibn Kathir. You see, these are like the most important works of Ulum al-Hadith. These names, they authored books that are the most important works of Ulum al-Hadith. طيب, this is not enough in saying that this was Shafi'i, a Shafi'i ilm. We have books authored by Al-Hanabila, Sharh Ilal al-Tirmidhi by Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. Remember, this is not a book in Mustalah al-Hadith. We are talking about books in Mustalah al-Hadith. You will not find a lot of contributions by the Hanabila in Mustalah al-Hadith in books that are dedicated to this purpose. Al-Hanafiyya, Al-Malikiyya, yeah, we might see books from these. يعني إصلاح كتاب ابن الصلاح, وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. إصلاح كتاب ابن الصلاح, one of the books that had one purpose, to إصلاح كتاب ابن الصلاح. It's a fixation, or it's fixing the book of Ibn Salah. So I'm criticizing the book of Ibn Salah للشيخ الحافظ علاء الدين مغلطاي. طيب, this is one example. You see books like نتيجة النظر, شرح نخبة الفكر, the Shaykh of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Hajar al-Asqalani explaining نخبة الفكر. يعني his student Ibn Hajar was the student of الشمني al-Qusantini, one of the Maliki scholars whose origins are like from Al-Jazair. So, explaining the book of his student, this is not intended to be a Maliki work on Ulum al-Hadith. Okay, so we might reach the conclusion that the choices of his Shafi'iyya that are mentioned in their books, these choices are what everyone agrees upon. This is not correct. This conclusion is not correct. Why? Because at the same time, we can see people's choices. However, although they are not mentioned in the books of Mustalah, but we can see them in books of Usul al-Fiqh. Because in Usul al-Fiqh, you start at some point talking about al-adilla, evidences, different types of evidence. The first is Al-Quran, the second is Sunnah. When you talk about Sunnah, you talk about a lot of the subjects or the topics that you study in Mustalah al-Hadith. Same topics are discussed by al-Muhaddithin in separate books, the books of Mustalah. And you see in the books of Usul, and these are Madhhabi books. So the book of Ibn al-Hajib is a Maliki, or it tends to be a Maliki book. However, the book of Subki, or the book of Al-Isnawi, or the book of Al-Baydawi tends to be a Shafi'i book. The book of Ibn al-Najjar, Ibn Muflih, Al-Kalwazani, Al-Qadi Abu Ya'la, they are Hanbali books. This is within the same school. They call it the school of Mutakallimin in Usul al-Fiqh. They are all together. And we have on the other side As-Sada al-Hanafiyya and their books of Usul. Their choices are different. Not entirely different, but there are differences. That's why when you get advanced in Ulum al-Hadith, you see something like whether al-Hadith al-Mursal, the Mursal Hadith, whether it's authentic or not, whether it's accepted or not, Hujjah or not, can it be used? Or it should be rejected unless we have certain conditions fulfilled. Aywa. So we can never say that the results al-Shafi'iyya reach in the Mustalah books are in every single issue the results that represent all the madhhab. Right? The climax of this story is when someone like, and I mentioned this a lot, is when someone like a Shaykh Ibn al-Hanbali al-Hanafi, the author of a book called Qafw al-Athar. It is like he copied the wording of Nuzhat al-Nadhr, but with some changes and additions. Qafw al-Athar. This scholar, Ibn al-Hanbali, this is a Hanafi scholar. His name, so Hanbali is a part of his name, maybe one of his grandfathers. I think I read this, but he is Hanafi, he is not Hanbali. In the introduction, after copying a huge part of Ibn Hajar's, Sayyidina Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani's introduction of Nuzhat al-Nadhr, Sharh Nukhbat al-Fikr, he mentioned that this book has a slightly different purpose. Yeah, you will learn Ulum al-Hadith, but this is to teach you the positions of our ashab, his ashab, al-Hanafiyya. Even if he didn't do so, even if you think that he didn't do so, this was his purpose. And he politely criticized something that Shaykh al-Islam ibn Hajar did in Nuzhat al-Nadhr. After praising him and after acknowledging his efforts, he politely criticized something that Shaykh al-Islam did in his book Nuzhat al-Nadhr. After praising the book and saying that it's a great book, he said, wa alaykum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. He said, لكن نفعه لم يعم الثلثين. I will literally translate this statement. The benefit of Ibn Hajar's book Nuzhat al-Nadhr, نفعه لكن نفعه لم يعم الثلثين. It didn't reach the two-thirds. Two-thirds of what? We might explain this. كأنه قول بالقلتين. As if it is holding the position of al-qullatayn. What does this mean? We will explain it. let's start from this last part. كأنه قول بالقلتين, as if you hold the position of القلتين. What is the issue of القلتين? It's something that you all study in fiqh, right? إذا بلغ الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. إذا بلغ الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. If water reaches قلتين, it doesn't get najis unless one of its qualities or one of its properties changes. So, if the najasa falls in a huge amount of water that reaches al-qullatayn, it doesn't affect the water unless one of the properties changes. So, if water is less than qullatayn, like a bottle of water for instance, qullatayn, this is like 300 liters or more or less, yani, approximately 300 liters. A huge amount of water, regardless of the number of liters. So if it's a bottle of water, for instance, then najasa will affect it immediately. It will become najis. It will become najis even if it doesn't change. Just encountering the najasa makes it najis. Okay. Whose madhhab is this? Al-Hanabila. But who knows about Al-Hanabila? يعني, they do not debate. They do not become judges. They do not like rulers, and they do not like rulers, like they do not go to them and praise them, and they do not do these things. Like Imam Ahmad, most of them at least, most of them. So we have few people who were qudah, and we know all of them because it's easy to know them. Not al-Hanabila. Shafi'iyya, yes, Shafi'i. Shafi'iyya also hold this, in general, they hold this position, the position of al-qullatayn, to distinguish يعني the issue of najasa or water encountering najasa, to distinguish when it's qullatayn and when it's less than qullatayn. And who doesn't hold this position? Al-Malikiyya, yes, wal-Hanafiyya. Wal-Hanafiyya. We all know about that competition, that challenge that has always been obvious in the history of Muslims, in the history of the fuqaha, between the fuqaha of al-Shafi'iyya and the fuqaha of al-Hanafiyya. Huge issues, and sometimes it reaches extremism in some times or some examples. But this contributed a lot to the Islamic fiqh. So sometimes they do not see al-Malikiyya because they live far away from them. Yani in Egypt you have Hanafiyya wa Shafi'iyya. A lot of the shuyukh of al-Azhar were Hanafiyya and definitely were Shafi'iyya. Shaykh al-Azhar al-Sharif, Imam al-Akbar, Shaykh al-Islam, in a lot of cases they were Hanafiyya and they were also Shafi'iyya. Shaykh al-Islam in the Ottoman Empire or the Ottoman Caliphate, Shaykh al-Islam was always Hanafi because Turkey and the Ottomans were Hanafi. Malikiyya, they live far away in al-Maghrib al-Arabi. Hanabila are few people, most of them in Najd and Blad al-Sham, and that's it. India, Pakistan. India could be شبه القارة الهندية. We say this in Arabic and we mean all these countries. India, Pakistan, Nepal and Bangladesh and all these countries, they were Hanafiya. So it is justifiable that we had that competition between al-Hanafiya and al-Shafi'i. So he addresses Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Ibn al-Hanbali al-Hanafi, by saying كأنه قول بالقلتين. He authored this book as if it's a book of fiqh. In a book of fiqh, you are Shafi'i, and I expect you to say, to mention your madhhab and to support your madhhab and to explain it and to stick to it and to command people to stick to it if they are Shafi'i. If you are Shafi'i, then you will tell people, yeah, كأنه قول بالقلتين, as if you hold the position of القلتين, as if it is an issue of fiqh. فلم يعم نفعه فلم يعم نفعه الثلثين. خلاص, فلم يعم نفعه الثلثين أو فلم يعم نفعه الثلثين كأنه قول بالقلتين. It didn't benefit the 2/3 of the ummah. This is my interpretation of it. He was Hanafi, so it didn't benefit 2/3 of the ummah, as if it's a fiqhi issue that that made you choose that position, Shafi'i position all the time, without mentioning other positions. In a book of fiqh, this is accepted. But in a book of mustalah, as if he wanted to say this is not accepted in a book of mustalah al-hadith. طيب, 2/3 of the ummah, you mean al-Hanafiya? Wallahi, it's possible that he said 2/3 of the ummah are Hanafiya. When it comes to the number of people, most of our scholars and most of the historians, they mention that the Hanafiya, in numbers, they are more than others, in numbers. Yes? And when it comes to the strongest madhab, they say, wallahi, the Shafi'iyya is the strongest madhab. Strongest like what? Like better madhab? I am Hanbali. The best madhab is the Hanbali madhab. Strongest means the madhab that is dominating al-qada in a lot of countries. So you'll find that the Shafi'i madhab is stronger because it dominates al-qada in Egypt, Yemen, in other places. خلاص. So they say maybe Shafi'i madhab is stronger when it comes to domination, when it comes to how it's spread in most of the countries. But in numbers, most of the ummah are Hanafiya. خلاص. Because of people in India and Pakistan and great. So لم يعم نفعه الثلثين. It doesn't benefit 2/3 of the ummah. Or maybe he meant it doesn't benefit 2/3 of the ummah. خلاص. As if Shafi'iyya is 1/3 and the rest of the madhahib are 2/3. This is relatively weak. And I do not like this interpretation, but I stick to the first one. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide me to the haqq in this. Anyways, this shows you the importance of not restricting ilm mustalah al-hadith to a certain madhab. And if we do so, the heritage of Muslims will be lost except for one madhab. So they were Shafi'iyya and they served their madahib. We should also serve our madahib and the other madahib. When it comes to mustalah al-hadith, we teach you how to become mujtahid. Definitely your ijtihad is limited, so limited. Alaykum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So limited, but in the end we teach you how to become as mujtahid as possible in ulum al-hadith. Also, in order to understand the works of the muhaddithin of your madhab, it doesn't help that you read all the time a Shafi'i version of the ilm. I say this, and I have 2 durus here in Egypt in ilm mustalah al-hadith. One of them is Muqaddimat ibn Salah by the great scholar Shaykh Abi Amr ibn Salah al-Shafi'i. And I do not leave one issue of al-ilm unless I find what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Hajar said about it, when it comes to مقدمة ابن الصلاح in his nukat, and what Shaykh al-Hafiz Zainuddin al-Iraqi said about it, and what Shaykh Badr al-Din al-Zarkashi said about it. 4 of them are Shafi'i. The other dars is المنهل الراوي لشيخ الإسلام قاضي القضاء بدر الدين بن جماعة. And this is also a Shafi'i scholar, and we explain his book in a weekly dars. So this is not coming from التعصب or extremism or being anti-Shafi'iyya or so. No. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله يحفظكم ويبارك فيكم. This is just me telling you, وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is just me telling you that it's really important to study the usul of ilm al-hadith in the other madhahib. So, if you are Hanbali, it is necessary that you understand ulum al-hadith, and we explained that before, so let's not repeat ourselves. It's necessary for you to know ilm mustalah al-hadith. You are not like Shafi'iyya. They had a book written by their imam to speak or to tackle these issues of fiqh. We narrate from our imam the issues of fiqh. It is really important, necessary for you to know ilm mustalah al-hadith. And we do not imagine that there is a Hanbali who lived while he was ignorant about ilm mustalah al-hadith, and he was sufficed by studying al-fiqh wa usul al-fiqh only. طيب. And yes, it is not sufficient to study usul al-fiqh. Even if you study the section of as-sunnah, it doesn't teach you ilm al-hadith properly. It teaches you the amount you need as an usuli, not as a muhaddith. طيب. And to study the Shafi'i version, which is the dominant version, is necessary. And to study your Madhhabs version of al-ilm is also necessary. But we do not have books. How did you solve this? I did a couple of things. I referred to the books of usul, as I told you. The choices are always there, but there are some issues that cannot be found there. A lot of issues. They are not the majority, but they are a lot. Refer to the books of usul. Refer to the books of al-Hanabila, especially Ahmad bin Hanbal radiallahu anhu himself in his book Al-Ilal, برواية Abdullah, his son, and برواية Salih. And I think this is the most important book I kept relying on. شرح علل الترمذي لابن رجب الحنبلي. These are the main books I used. Other books were also included, but their contribution wasn't big. That's why it is difficult to mention all of them, especially when you take just small pieces to help with something, to support something in what I was authoring. I started working on this 6 years ago. I did not finish until it's published, so it is never finished. But I have a complete version with me that explains usul al-hadith عند al-Hanabila, and it's written in Arabic. This is what I will be explaining in these durus, and I wrote it in a concise way, so it's like a matn, and it needs a lot of explanation, to the extent that I sometimes suffer when explaining it, because I do not remember what I meant when I said what I said, because the language is a little bit complicated because of how concise it is. I think I answered all the questions that we received regarding this course, because things were not clear on the posts, in the post that the admins posted on the Facebook page and the other things. So I think this would be enough clarification on the matter. I recommend this for people who studied anything in ulum al-hadith before. anything will be sufficient as long as you have an idea what this is, because we will not be, so it suits beginners, but which type of beginners? This is the type of beginners it suits, because we will not be explaining basic issues from the very beginning. However, I had the intention, and I told this to Al-Hasan, I had the intention to include my explanation of Tadhkira Ibn al-Mulaqqin in 6 durus, 8 durus, something like that. I explained the Tadhkira, and this works for beginners who had no idea about Ulum al-Hadith as a supplementary course with the Hanbali choices. I mean, the recordings of Tazkira will be provided. I told this to Al-Hasan. I haven't told Sheikh Musa yet, so I will be working on this. This is everything about this course. Also, I have received a message regarding the course, but this has already started, so it's up to the admins to accept people, but it's not, it's fine to clarify this so that people know what we are doing. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The guiding principles of at-tasawwuf. This is not a course in which I make you Sufi, because I am not Sufi myself. And by I am not Sufi myself, I haven't reached that high rank. But I love those people, and I try to imitate them and follow their footsteps. And I am more of a mutasawwif, like I am in the process and I'm trying, but I have never reached any rank. So I will not raise you. I will not advise you to take a certain way, certain path, or to be on to follow a certain behavior, or to say this dhikr or that dhikr. I have nothing to do with this right now. It's basically reading and explaining some of the principles of Sayyidi Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. That if you do not understand what at-tasawwuf is, it will explain it to you. These principles, they will explain it to you. And if you understand what at-tasawwuf is, they will help you make your understanding deeper. Khalas? So, this is really important. I'm not sure whether they accept people or not, but this is really important. And in the end, it's all taken from the books of Sayyidi Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. These principles are explained in a ilmi way. So we analyze that discourse, what he said, things that he referred to, and as if we are explaining a matn of fiqh. And we do not say the statements of Sada Sufiya, because this is not my rank to say these things and to mislead people that I hold a certain rank that I do not deserve. If you understand this, I think there's nothing else to discuss regarding the courses. If you have questions, I will be able, inshallah, to receive them. Just please work on your questions and enhance them. Do not be like most of people on social media. If the question, Sheikh Naveed, if you are still here, the questions go away. So if you send me the questions on WhatsApp, I will be able to answer them. And if it's not possible, I will try to answer them anyways. And this is the end, by the way, so you can ask questions now. Yes, so you said yes, which, okay, great. If you can send your questions here, and Sheikh Naveed will send the questions here, and I will be able to answer them if you have any questions. Yes, Al-Barbahari, I got this, yes. Al-Barbahari is an accepted figure in the Hanbali school. Yeah, he is. But is this really important? Yes, he is an accepted figure in the Hanbali school. Or no, he is not an accepted figure in the Hanbali school. What is the most important thing? Do we have a book for him? Yes, Sharh al-Sunnah. If I read this book and I explained it to students, and if there is something that we do not agree with him on, we just mentioned it. And the man who is used a lot by the Salafiyya actually is one of few people who said the word of tafweed when it comes to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not tafweed al-kayfiyya, tafweed al-ma'na when it comes to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah. Should one learn Arabic before learning ulum al-hadith? This is really important. If you haven't learned the Arabic language yet, you should start learning the Arabic language. But please learn ulum al-hadith as soon as possible. In English, in Urdu, in Arabic, in any language, learn ulum al-hadith, at least 2 levels of ulum al-hadith, and then do not continue, stop there, and then go learn Arabic language until you are like proficient and everything, and then continue learning ulum al-hadith. Ulum al-hadith is not just about the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It will enhance the way you think, it will develop you as a human being, it will develop your mind, and you'll be able to learn the critical method of al-ulama, not ulama al-hadith, of al-ulama in general. So it will help us in the dars of al-fiqh. When you learn ulum al-hadith, this will help us in the dars of al-fiqh. I will tell you what, it will help us in the dars of logic, in al-mantiq. When we study al-mantiq, your mind will be developed and better than your peers who didn't study al-mantiq before. Al-ilm is connected, and one thing affects the other. What is the manzila of the riwayah of Abdullah ibn al-Imam Ahmad radiallahu anhu in the madhhab if it contradicts the riwayah of al-Marwuzi, for example, which takes priority? If it's just Abdullah and if it's just al-Marwuzi, mostly Abdullah will be preferred. However, there are cases in which al-Marwuzi is preferred, but I just want to remind you that cases are not that simple. Yani the way we assumed that matter is a simple way. Things are not that simple. Usually there are other things that you take into consideration, one of which is the riwayat of other narrators that might support al-Marwuzi or might support Abdullah. I answered this question not assuming that we had anything to do with the time, the dates of the riwayat. Hanafi Dubandi group of India, good group. Ahl Sunnah, I want to study Hanafi Madhhab. Can I study with them? I do not know. Ask people who know more about them. Khalas. As long as they are from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, Asha'ira, Maturidiyya, Athariya like Hanabila, and I do not think that there are Hanabila there, but I'm not sure. I saw some Athariya there who do tafweed. They do not say we are Hanabila, they say we are Hanafi. However, while doing tafweed, they also say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists in a place, so it doesn't make sense. So things there in India are complicated, too complicated for someone like me to judge them, because I do not live there and I haven't experienced a lot of things there. When can a person say that he belongs to an individual madhhab and not a layman? When he follows that madhhab and he holds an amount of knowledge that allows him to understand most of that madhhab, even if he doesn't know the everything in that madhhab, like all the issues of the madhhab. But also, if that person seeks knowledge and he considers himself a student of knowledge, then he has been immediately elevated from the ranks of laymen, because now he considers himself a student of knowledge and he behaves like one. This is enough as a first step. And then when he becomes knowledgeable enough to know most of his madhhab, to know most of what he needs in his madhhab, and he's capable بالقوة القريبة to know the rest of the madhhab, then he's definitely not a layman. What is the difference between the positions of Ithbat and Tafweed, and are both of these madhabs acceptable amongst the Hanabila? Well, if you mean by Ithbat to claim that Yad is hand, this is kufr. Okay? So if you call this Ithbat in that case is kufr. But Ithbat like confirming a meaning for the attribute that no one knows except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the position of الطائفة الناجية المنصورة الحنابلة وغيرهم. نعم. Hanbali scholars in Jeddah, you advise us to take from be careful. I'm not sure. Be careful when it comes to the Hanabila of our times. Be careful. Just be careful. It's a madhab that doesn't have a lot of shuyukh. So if I were you, I would be really careful, and the way I evaluate people would be that I see how dedicated they are to al-ilm, to the issue of al-ilm, not to other issues. Even al-radd al-Wahhabiyya, even refuting the Wahhabiyya, this is not a real cause. If they are dedicated to al-ilm itself, then this is a good sign, and then we can continue. And on the way, you will see other signs. Dedicated to al-ilm, not dedicated to making himself famous, not dedicated to making himself known or so. Dedicated to al-ilm itself. Now, I'm not sure about Jeddah because I have never been there. I have never left Egypt. Wa alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What is the aqidah of Ibn Manda? I cannot explain the aqidah of Ibn Manda now. I thought you were asking about one person. Yani, please, yani. Are they Mufawwid? I have heard Harb al-Kirmani was a student of Muhammad ibn Karram. Is this true? This question does bother you, if I'm sorry. If this question bothers you, yeah. It bothers me because this is difficult. We are talking about people, we are not talking about animals. What is the aqidah of Fulan, and one word in a live session would be sufficient? If you want this type of answers, most of Ahmad's students were Mufawwida. Most of them. Not all of them, most of them. They were Mufawwida. Some of them had problems with the same problems that most of al-Muhaddithin face when they do not learn al-fiqh, when they do not learn al-ilm other than ulum al-hadith, that they were either Zahiriyya or Mujassima. Now, anyways, most of Ahmad's students were Mufawwida. I do not know about the question of the spices. I do not remember what it's called in Arabic, so I'm not sure. Ask someone else. Any other questions? Barakallahu feekum wa jazakumullahu khairan. This is enough for they similar in terms of doing tafweed. Al-Maturidiyya do ta'wil too. Ghost al-Tib. A controversial issue. I do not feel like answering this question. Ask someone else. I can explain the general principles when it comes to things like these, spices or anything that you take. I can explain the general principle, but let's do this in the durus of fiqh, so that people do not get misled. Difference between the Maturidi and the Athari: the Maturidi do ta'wil too, by the way. But there are Maturidiyah who do tafweed. In that case, their tafweed is similar to anyone's tafweed. Tafweed is just one madhab. There are no madhahib, different madhahib called tafweed. It's just one madhab. Okay. I think this is enough. Barakallahu feekum. See you inshallah soon. We are working on inshallah having a weekly live session or 2 weekly live sessions, and we will also planning to have different videos, short ones like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, to tackle different issues related to the Hanbali Madhhab and the ulum in general, and it's dedicated in addressing laymen and beginners in the first place. Maybe we discuss deep issues of al-ilm, but if it's only appropriate to discuss them, I hope you benefited from this, and I recommend you to join the Hanbali course if you have studied something before in ulum al-hadith and if you are Hanbali. Okay, it doesn't harm you if you're not Hanbali, but I'm addressing al-Hanabila in the first place. والله تعالى أعلى وأعلم وصلي اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.